What is going on, everybody, and welcome back to another week of NFL picks. It is week 4, and we're already, to I guess what some may call almost quarter of the way through the season. It's already going by fast. But hey, listen, still got a lot of season left. Now is week 4. Obviously, that for the first few weeks, the first early part of the season is officially done. It's week 3, into week 3 now. We're going into week 4. We know what a lot of these teams look like now. First 1-2 weeks, really can't judge because it is so early. Now we really know what a lot of these teams look like, and maybe their record, does or doesn't tell the entire story. But one way or another, we have a good idea of what these teams look like and really what they are. And we got another good slate of games this week. Obviously, had a good slate of games last week. But without further ado, man, let's get right into it. Last week, I went 9-7, which is actually the first winning record I've had for a week, bringing my overall record to 23-25, still under 5. I got to do better. First few weeks, especially I think week 2 really hurt me. But yeah, no, that definitely got to do better. I am, 9-7, but still definitely want to improve on that. Lock of the week 2-1, and upset of the week 0-3 so far on the season. Thursday night football. Back at MetLife Stadium for a second week in a row is the crew at Amazon, as the Dallas Cowboys has 2 games, at Jerry World, a place that for 2 years they had basically, they could not lose in, have ran out of their own building back-to-back weeks. I know that score against Baltimore, it got real close. But look, the bottom line is the Cowboys, they need to get away from AT&T Stadium, it feels like. They need to get in just get away from there. It's a short week. And you're going up against a divisional rival in the New York Giants, a Giants team that did pick up their first win of the season this past Sunday versus Cleveland. So the Giants finally do get in the win column. But, the one thing about the Cowboys, as up and down as they are, they've always seemed to dominate the Giants in recent years. I don't think that's changing here. I think the Cowboys, they come out, they take care of business. I think this is going to be one of those classic Dallas games where the offense comes out, Dak and CD do their thing, and the Cowboys go out and they dominate the Giants. I'm going to go ahead, lock this in as my lock of the week. I don't see where the Giants can win this game, unless the Cowboys absolutely crap themselves, which they have done. But I really don't see the Giants winning this game, even though they did get the win. I don't see them winning this game, so I'm going to go ahead and give Dallas the win here. Moving into our Sunday slate of games, first game we have here on Sunday, the Cincinnati Bengals 0-3. The Bengals have always had slow starts, but they've never been 0-3. That kind of, it's not what the expectation was for the Bengals. They go into Charlotte. They face a Carolina Panthers team that got a win last week in Vegas, so they're finally in the win column this season. Andy Dalton, the former Bengals quarterback, is now, quarterback in Carolina. He had a really solid outing last week. He's going to, want a little bit of revenge versus his old team, I reckon. But look, I think the Bengals, they got to get a win at some point. It feels like they're going to get a win here. I do think it could be a close game. Maybe it's an offensive game. Panthers offense has shown a lot more life since benching Bryce Young. Maybe raising the question, was it really Bryce that was the issue? Obviously a quarterback can't fix everything, but can at least stabilize some aspects of that football team in Charlotte. But I think the Bengals are due for a win. I mean, look, they play pretty solid. It's just Washington has been so, and we're going to talk about them when we get to their game. Washington has been such a shocker, and you got to give credit to them. But at the same time, the Bengals, it has not been the best start, but it feels like they finally have to get in the win column here, and I think they will, picking up the win, getting the first one of the season. The next game we have here, everyone knows what this is. You know it is rivalry week. You know, it is the Falcons. It's the Aints. It's in the bins. And I'm going to talk about the game later this week. As I've said, I'm going to be doing a panel, try to get some Falcons fans, try to get some Saints fans. We're going to chop it up about this game. So I'm going to talk about this game later in the week. But, I'm going to go ahead and I think the Falcons are going to win this game. Not going to talk too much about it. But I'm going to go – I will say this. I think now 3 weeks into the season, and I've, talked a lot about the Chiefs game, but we did play with them. We proved that we can play with anyone, and now really getting that stuff figured out, knowing what we need to improve on offense. Even though McGarry and Dahlman being out, it is going to be a big deal. McGarry might play, but Dahlman for sure is going to be out. That could be a big deal. I think this is finally about time that Kirk Cousins is going to come out and he's finally going to start showing why he is Kirk Chains. And that being said, I think the Falcons are going to come out. I think the offense is going to have an outing, and I think we're going to get that win, getting to 2-2 on the season and beating the Aints. Next game we have here, another divisional game. We have some division games here in week 4. The 0-3 Jacksonville Jaguars. Obviously, Jacksonville had a very disappointing end to last season, and the first 3 games this season have been absolutely disappointing. You had a lead in Miami. You couldn't hold on to it. You had a game versus the Browns you easily could have won that you just could not win, and you got absolutely dominated in Buffalo. As far as the Texans go, 2-1, they're coming off of, a very shocking loss last week versus Minnesota. So, it's definitely both teams are looking to bounce back. Now, I'm going to say this. You look at, teams that are due and teams that are due. I think Jacksonville has to be due for a win at some point. And I honestly think it could really come when their backs are against the wall. No one's really expecting it. I'm actually going to go ahead. I'm going to say this is my upset of the week, and I'm going to pick Jacksonville to win this game. Obviously Houston is a really good team, but, they had, kind of a slow start last year. And this year, considering, everything that's going on, still, getting used to it. It's still early in the season. Obviously, a few weeks in. Still early in the season, but everything going on in Jacksonville, it feels like they're due for a win. And I think they're going to get it here. So I'm going to go ahead, pick the Jaguars. I think they get their first win of the season. Texans dropped to 2-2. Next game we have here, the Denver Broncos. Bo Nix looked real impressive last week in that game in Tampa. Broncos get their first win of the season. You talk about teams due for a win. The Broncos were just due for a win. They got one. Going into MetLife Stadium to face the New York Jets and Aaron Rodgers. Obviously for the Jets, 2-1. Things are looking good. Looked real good versus New England. And I feel like if the Jets can come out, take care of business here, I think this is going to be another W. I really feel like, the Jets are getting into a rhythm with Aaron Rodgers. I do. I still think the Broncos got things to grow on, got things to improve on. Obviously showed flashes last week. But, having to go up against a quarterback like Aaron Rodgers, it can be real tough in New York. I'm going to go ahead, give this one to the Jets. Next game we have here. And one of the big stories throughout the NFL to start this season has been the Minnesota Vikings and Sam Darnold, a Vikings team that lost Kirk Cousins this offseason to free agency here in Atlanta. There were a lot of what-ifs, a lot up in the air, and J.J. McCarthy goes down. So Sam Darnold, pretty much a journeyman for the past few years. He's came out. He's absolutely balled out. They're 3-0. But they go into Lambeau Field for a matchup against the 2-1 Green Bay Packers. The Packers team, they lost Jordan Love, but they've went 2-0 since then. And, does Jordan Love play this Sunday? I would honestly think he's going to try to push too. But I think once again, we're talking about, do for something. The Vikings are going to lose eventually. They have had their, even though I do think they have done better in Green Bay in recent years, typically they do struggle there. So I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to give this one to the Packers. I think they pick up the W here, going to 3-1, giving the Vikings their first loss of the season. It's a division game. Obviously, anything can happen in those divisional games. So I'm going to go ahead, get the Packers a win here. Next game we got here, the Pittsburgh Steelers. They're really another one of those stories, especially with Justin Fields. He's completing over 70% of his passes. He's playing basically the exact opposite he played in Chicago. And Fields, obviously, what is that leash? What does it look like? But look, I think as long as Fields is not costing you games, as long as he's not turning the ball over, I think you keep him in there. I do expect they'll keep him in there again this week. They're going into Indianapolis and a Colts team that, even though they got the first win this past Sunday versus Chicago, Anthony Richardson has not looked good. He's turning the ball over. And honestly, I think if Richardson does not clean this up, it is only a matter of time before you start looking at Joe Flacco. With that being said, this just feels like one of those games the Steelers are going to come out, and it's going to be close, but the Steelers are going to come out, and they're going to win once again with their defense. Anthony Richardson gets rattled. The Steelers pull off a win here. They go to 4-0 on the year. Indianapolis drops to 1-3. Next game here, battle of 1-2 teams. The LA Rams got their first win versus the 49ers last week, after obviously a tough start to the season for the Rams. They, have been dealing with their injuries. They're going into Chicago to face a Bears team, that they need. Caleb Williams are really looking at trying to clean stuff up, trying to get into a groove, build chemistry with those weapons on offense. And I do think things are going to come together for them. However, it just, with it being this early in the season, the Rams, and Matthew Stafford and company, McVay, finally getting into a rhythm, getting their feet wet with these new circumstances. I do think they're going to go into Chicago and get a win. I do think it's going to be a close game. It could go either way. I'm going to go ahead, give this one to the Rams. I think they're going to come out of this one on top with the W. Next game we have here, and this was the toughest game to pick this week. And I actually flipped back and forth in this game. The Philadelphia Eagles and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Philly got a win last week in New Orleans, but they played absolutely terrible for a lot of the game. The Buccaneers, they got upsetted by the Denver Broncos. So now Tampa Bay, Philadelphia, battle of 2-1 teams. It's a playoff rematch from last year. I'm going to go ahead and say initially I was going to pick Philadelphia just because I felt like this would be another game. They would do just enough to get a win in. But really looking at a lot of their issues, and obviously a Saints team that was really 2-0. And it really, in many ways, I don't think was figured out. I think a lot of people, they were just one of those things that popped early, and it's like, how did this happen? But they really did come back down to earth. The Eagles did just enough to literally, to get a win. Even though they, tried every opportunity to give the Saints that game. Honestly, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to pick Tampa here. This is one I went really back and forth on, but I'm going to pick the Bucs just because it feels like, obviously this is a game Philly could absolutely win, but it just does. It feels like Philly has a lot of issues they got to get figured out. And Tampa, obviously it's up and down with Baker Mayfield. He can have a few good weeks. He can have a few bad weeks, but I do think that Tampa is going to be able to do enough with their offense to win this game. Philly, it's still early. And typically Philly comes out hot early. But this year, it feels like they got to get a lot of things figured out. So I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to give this one to Tampa. Heading into our 4 o'clock window, we have the New England Patriots, San Francisco 49ers. San Francisco, they pretty much had that game last week and they let it slip right through their hands. New England, they got a nice win week 1, but since then they've really come back down to earth. Is it only a matter of time before Drake May, is officially called in as quarterback? I think what you really got to look at, though, in this game, New England traveling across the country, obviously they are, San Francisco's, even with the injuries, I believe is the better team. I think if the 49ers come out and take care of business, I think they should win this game. This is one of those games you should not lose, even in, circumstances where McCaffrey's out, Debo's out, Kittle's out. I still think you're a better team than New England. I think you pick up the W. Next game, and you want to talk about, it's shocking. Washington. Now, I honestly really was high on Washington. I thought that they stood a good chance to get to the playoffs. I thought Jaden Daniels would be the QB1 in this draft class this year, but I wasn't expecting it to be this early. The game he just had in Cincinnati on primetime was absolutely amazing. He looked like a top 5 quarterback throughout that entire game. This is another one of those games. Honestly, I was really leaning towards Arizona, and maybe they still do get it. Maybe Washington comes back down to earth. Maybe their head's a little too big. But at the same time, for the performance Jane Daniels just, gave, I think you absolutely build on that. Arizona is not really a good team, even though they are at home. I think Washington's going to get the win here. I do. And I think they're going to go to 3-1. It's been very impressive so far from them to see. I think as long as they can stay healthy, I think they're going to continue to build on it. I think they got something building there. I'm not a Dan Quinn fan, but I'm going to give credit where credit is due. It looks like they got something brewing there with Jane Daniels. So I'm going to go ahead and give Washington the win here. Heading into our 425 window, Kansas City at the LA Chargers. And it feels like the Chiefs. It feels like they're due for a loss at some point. All these games that they've had have basically been decided at the end. The only thing with the Chargers is they're so banged up. Herbert is banged up. It's questionable on whether he'll play. Joe Alt, their rookie tackle, is out. The Chargers are really banged up, and we know that they really don't have much of a home field advantage. I gotta pick the Chiefs here. I do, even though, it feels like they're gonna lose one of these games soon. It's so hard to pick the Chargers with all the things that they are currently battling. So I'm gonna go ahead and give this one to the Chiefs. Next game we have here is the Cleveland Browns and the Las Vegas Raiders. Both these teams, Cleveland had an embarrassing loss last week. The Raiders had an embarrassing loss last week. 2 games I think many thought they should have won. It's so embarrassing looking at it. Cleveland and the Deshaun Watson thing. Obviously, it feels like at this point that was an absolute botch. With Vegas, their quarterback situation might honestly be the worst in the entire NFL, with the lack of clarity at that position. With that being said, I think if Cleveland comes out and they do use their running game, I do got to go ahead and give this one to them just because, it's a game that could go either way. It is. It's a game. Initially, I was thinking about picking the Raiders. I got to pick the Browns here. It could go either way, but Vegas, they got some issues. Cleveland does too, but it's really I'm going to pick the Browns here. Sunday Night Football, the 3-0 Bills. The Bills, they're another team. The Bills, there were a lot of questions about them this offseason. They have looked really good these first few weeks. They go into Baltimore though on Sunday night. And it feels like the Ravens, they had a game opening night. They could have won a game versus the Raiders. I honestly don't know how they lost that game. in a game, that they won in Dallas. So when really looking at it, I got to go ahead. I got to give the Ravens the win here. It feels like the Bills are going to be due to take a loss here at some point. And also, I think this is going to be a good game overall. I do. I think we're in store for a good one between Lamar and Josh. I think ultimately, or I don't know why it says the Bills 26, the Ravens 20, but I am picking Baltimore in this matchup. Just to be clear with that, I know that might be a little misleading, the score being flipped, but I am going to go ahead. I'm going to pick Baltimore in this matchup to come out on top with the W 26-20. I think it's going to be a pretty good game. Monday night, and let me tell you something. This is a game I don't think many people have an interest for watching. The Titans have, honestly, Will Levis does not look good. The Dolphins without Tua are a mess. But ultimately, I don't want to spend too much time on this. It's Monday night. I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to pick the Titans here. I think they're another team. They're due for a win. I think they're due to get a win. Honestly, that's the thing with the NFL today. You don't really see too many teams get to a point where they're so close to, being winless or they're so close to being undefeated. I know the Panthers last year, but, that's a very rare case today. Teams are going to get wins at some point. Teams are going to lose at some point. I think the Titans are going to win probably a pretty ugly ball game here in Miami on a Monday night. And we do have one more Monday night game, this one in Detroit. The Seahawks are 3-0. They have been impressive. Lions, obviously, have had another solid start to the season. I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to pick the Lions here. I think Seattle is due for a loss. They have not faced a team like Detroit. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to pick the Lions here to get that W. Seattle suffers their first loss of the season. I'm going to pick the Lions here to get a win. I think they're the better team. Home field advantage playing in Detroit is tough. The typical. So I'm going to go ahead, give Detroit the W. But that being said, it's another week. And it's another week. It's going to be a good week of games. And I will see you all in the next one.